Today I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about enterprise cloud infrastructure and how Lumeta ESI can be used to provide situational awareness of enterprise cloud-based deployments. It turns out that enterprises are turning to cloud models for internal or private uses to take advantage of the speed and flexibility of deploying compute and storage for new internal application workloads. Very often, though, this private cloud flexibility comes with a price, one of which is that virtualized network functions and virtual compute resources are coming and going very quickly and may be missed entirely by enterprise security scanning infrastructure. Furthermore, enterprises are also attaching to public cloud infrastructure as a service, services like Amazon Web Services or AWS or VMware vCloud Air. They're attaching to their networks via VPNs to accommodate application development operations, so-called DevOps, website and web application development and deployment, as well as scaling up big data analysis projects. Unfortunately, sometimes these public cloud implementations are done by a department within the enterprise without the full knowledge of internal IT processes that are responsible for cybersecurity or network operations, leading to what's called, or commonly called, shadow IT. Lumeta ESI helps to provide visibility and network situational awareness to private and public cloud arrangements. According to a survey by Information Week, some of the top cloud concerns among IT security professionals are, number one, security of the cloud technology itself. What's going on behind the scenes? What's happening when I spin up resources and take them away on a cloud infrastructure? How secure is the underlying platform? Secondly, IT professionals in cybersecurity are concerned about the loss of corporate information from an attached cloud. And thirdly, they're concerned about loss of customer information from an attached cloud. As with physical networks, you can't secure what you don't know about or don't have visibility into. Given the dynamic nature of virtualized cloud infrastructure where compute, memory, storage, and virtualized network infrastructure like virtual routers or virtual switches, forwarders, firewalls can be spun up, used, and then spun down within a few minutes, real-time network situational awareness features of Lumeta ESI are critical for real-time indexing and anomaly detection of cloud assets and infrastructure. Point-in-time scan-only cyber tools are going to miss this temporal, dynamic assets in a cloud model, period. Nothing they can do about it. So let's talk about Lumeta ESI for a second. The advantage of ESI is that its network situational awareness can be extended across physical, virtual, and cloud infrastructure to provide a holistic, real-time, and authoritative view of network-based cybersecurity. And there are two critical components or capabilities of ESI that allow us. First is the passive listening capability, allowing us to hear network control broadcast information and to react to that change in real time. Any asset, whether it's physical or virtual, that's going to use the network is going to cause real-time transactions in the network control plane. Soon as ESI hears these, is able to point its active interrogation capabilities to focus on that device or that network while it's present. So no change to the network infrastructure is missed. The second capability is that ESI has this concept of a rescanning interval, which is configurable by the user, by the administrator. The default value of this rescan interval is 10 minutes. Some organizations set it to 3 or 4 minutes. Some will set it longer. But every rescan interval, ESI will re-look at and actively interrogate a zone to see if there's been any change to routed paths, change to port usage, for example, And it'll also recalculate and indicate any possible anomalies or violation of security policy based on what is found in that latest rescan interval. So where are the places where ESI can fit and be helpful within a cloud infrastructure? On this slide, I've shown sort of the public, private, and hybrid cloud opportunities that are in existence in enterprise infrastructure. Within public, you've got software as a service, or SaaS. ESI doesn't play in that particular area. You also have platform as a service, or PaaS, where the compute as well as a particular development application is being provided within the cloud infrastructure. Again, Lumeta ESI does not play in that environment. However, for public infrastructure as a service, services like Amazon Web Services, Elastic Compute, VMware vCloud Air, ESI is perfect for those kinds of environments. And where I mentioned the example uses might be development operations, websites, web applications. A lot of startups are using those environments, and big data application infrastructure. On private cloud infrastructure, Lumeta ESI plays as well. You might have tools in that infrastructure such as VMware vSphere Suite, or outsourced providers such as Verizon, Terramark, SAP, and others who are outsourcing private cloud data center operations for enterprise customers. And then certainly in hybrid models where you're mixing public infrastructure as a service and private, Lumeta ESI fits perfectly and can provide, in fact, a holistic view across the hybrid cloud model, the hybrid cloud infrastructure. From a deployment standpoint, there are at least a couple of models that are interesting for Lumeta ESI. In the case where Lumeta ESI is being installed on the physical network for real-time network situational awareness, we have the capability to look through a virtual VPN and identify resources in a public cloud instance or virtual private cloud environment. And that's shown here as public cloud instance 1, which is attached via a VPN into the enterprise network. And we can identify virtual machine assets that are being spun up and down in that VPC instance through the VPN to help a security or cyber team understand what's going on within that environment. You could also spin up a Lumeta Scout, which is our sensor, within that environment to provide even deeper visibility of what's happening within that instance. But it's not mandatory that you do so. You can identify assets dynamically and changing network topology through the VPN. The second deployment model, which you're showing in public cloud instance 2, is where ESI is actually being spun up in the cloud itself, and where you're leveraging the resources of the cloud to actually run the back-end analytics and other functionality of ESI. So, for example, you could use that in a use case to analyze the edge of the enterprise infrastructure in real time from a Amazon EC2 instance. And there are other interesting use cases for that as well. You could deploy scouts on the enterprise, and it could feed telemetry into a centralized public cloud instance where ESI is doing the heavy lifting from a deployment standpoint. So we've seen both of those implementations be interesting and useful to enterprise customers. So let's talk about some of the very specific use cases. Hybrid cloud situational awareness is a very important one. In this particular case, you have a public cloud provider, Amazon, for example, attached to an enterprise via VPN. And in this particular case, the security operations team or the cyber team wants to gain visibility to not only their physical infrastructure, but they want to understand what's going on, what visibility can be achieved in the VPC as well. So in this particular case, Lumeta ESI is able to identify and report at the SOC new cloud or virtual assets within less than a minute of them being spun up. And this is where you have a great need, and ESI is a great assistance in the shadow IT kind of model, providing visibility into those environments. Furthermore, within a rescan interval that I mentioned before, we're able to identify whether those virtual assets in the VPC are adjusting or changing the layer 3 topology. You can identify, for example, if one of those virtual machines might be running a forwarder, which could be a rogue router, for example, and where it could be routing or forwarding traffic outside of the public cloud to other places on the internet, by way of example. And we can, of course, monitor that in real time, and we can alert on that at the Security Operations Center if that policy is violated. And certainly ESI can be used to view multiple zones and to deploy different indexing techniques for each one of those zones. So you might have a different technique in the physical versus a more rigorous technique, for example, for indexing in the public cloud environment. So ESI allows you that capability. Another use case that I mentioned earlier was where I want to have a real-time analysis of any changes to the edge of my corporate network infrastructure. In this particular case, a ESI instance could be spun up, or a ESI Scout sensor can be spun up in the public internet cloud, and it can target the edge of the corporate network and be constantly helping the firewall team understand if there are any changes to firewall infrastructure which are erroneously allowing traffic in through the edge into assets that shouldn't be accessible from the outside. Very important use case, helps to head off in the network operations group any errant configuration changes to firewall infrastructure that might exist in real time, and allow them to address those in real time before they become a problem. Another use case for ESI is shown here, which is real-time private cloud segmentation validation. This is a useful one for services providers who might be delivering private cloud services to other enterprises, and where, based on SLA, the services provider is guaranteeing that there's never a way for private cloud instance to be able to communicate with a different company's private cloud instance. And if that ever happens, you want to ring the alarm bell at the operations center to identify and lock down and remove that violation. So in this particular scenario, the Lumeta ESI command center would be located in the operations center. You'd have sensors in each one of the private cloud instances, and that would be orchestrated by the services provider. And those sensors would be in real time looking to see if there were any paths, any routes to any one of the other private cloud instances in use, and using a variety of different techniques and protocols and ports, and if that were violated, provide an immediate real-time indication to the operations center where they could get that issue remedied very quickly. So what I'd like to do is very quickly just show a live demonstration of ESI as we wrap up this discussion. In this particular demonstration, we actually have an Amazon Web Services EC2 instance, as well as a separate virtual private cloud instance that's been spun up. That instance is targeting the Lumeta internal network from the outside, and we're actually able to take a look at what we can see in terms of paths, traffic flow, and let me just jump to that. So this is a map that we're showing here. I'll zoom out for a bit because it's a relatively reasonably sized instance in one of the zones that we have configured, and then I'll zoom in to give some more specific details about what we're able to see in that map. So this tab with the Lumeta logo is actually a Lumeta ESI instance, and it is spun up within the Amazon Web Services infrastructure. And then, when I zoom out, you can actually see that there are a number of egress points to the public internet from that AWS instance. So we're actually able to trace all of the public IP addresses that instance can use to get out of the Amazon Web Services infrastructure to get to the public internet. So all these 205.251 addresses that you see here are, the egress points that we've been able to identify getting out of the Amazon EC2 instance. What we actually also have overlaid on here is because we have a VPC, we're actually able to see the egress points from the AWS infrastructure for the virtual private network traffic. So these 169.254 addresses that you see here and here and here represent VPN primary and redundant gateways that are allowing access out to, in this case, through a carrier through to this 65.246 address, which is Lumeta's internal VPN concentrator and a router actually that sits behind that concentrator. The other stuff that you see that we were able to map in this image, there are a bunch of 100 dot addresses, which is actually illustrating the carrier infrastructure that sits between this Amazon Web Services instance and public internet access points. So these 100 dots all represent natted carrier-grade infrastructure on the other side of the AWS egress point, and are how the carrier is conveying traffic from the AWS edge out to the world. So that's an example of a map that we were able to draw dynamically in real time, and the question marks on these devices mean at the moment we don't know exactly what those devices are. This is just using our path tracing algorithms. We know it's a forwarding device based on the techniques that we're using. We know how we got to it. We know how we got through it. We're able to put that up on the map and illustrate it to the administrator. And by analysis of this, they're able to then understand a bit more about what's the topology of that public cloud infrastructure and how is it internet working via VPN into my organization. We also obviously have a dashboard for that particular zone. This is the standard Lumeta network index. where we're constantly analyzing 16 different things that we believe contribute to a network situational awareness profile, and we're able to give that particular zone an overall score. Higher scores are worse in this particular case because there are a number of unknown devices that were outside the initial target list as we were doing our indexing. We're saying that that's a relatively high risk or vulnerability profile that the organization might want to look into. We also have some other zones that we created, and I'll bring up a map for one of those zones. One of the interesting capabilities of ESI is that the organization can create these zones based upon different areas, and each one of those areas you might have a different need for indexing. Some you might want to be more rigorous. Some you might want to be discovering using different techniques or indexing using different techniques. And so the capability of the platform to establish these different zones in the way that the enterprise thinks about them is a very, very useful function in the platform. So with that, I hope that I've given you a reasonable view or reasonable assessment of where Lumeta ESI can actually be used to help an organization kind of figure out what their situational awareness of their cloud environment is. I'd like to thank you for viewing, and if you need more information, please go to our website, lumeta.com, or you can certainly send me an email to rbest@lumeta.com if you have any specific questions about this briefing. Thank you very much.